Elderly woman catches 4 boys in her yard, cries when she realizes what they're doing. Laws and rules are what keeps our society functioning the way it's supposed to. As some of you may know, the law isn't always foolproof, and sometimes rules are extremely easy to break, especially when you don't even know that they exist. The woman didn't understand why she was being told that she needed to go to court. She sat on her couch in her living room, overwhelmed with thoughts of what she should do next. While she was thinking about what her next step should be, she heard the sound of banging coming from her yard. She looked out the window to see what was going on, and that's when she saw them. As the 4 boys made their way towards her, shivers ran down her spine. All she could think about was whether or not she should run. Gerry Suttle is a 75-year-old woman from Texas. She spends her time enjoying her retirement on her land, living as peacefully as she can. She was able to purchase land when she was younger, and now she's able to live out her life on her 2 acres. Gerry realizes that she's not as young and active as she once was, so she most certainly wasn't expecting the visit she got from the police. As you know, every state has their own laws, but Texas has one law in particular that has left Gerry in a state of confusion. Gerry Suttle called Riesel, Texas her home for a long time. One of Riesel's laws states that the grass on your property can't be more than 18 inches tall, and you'll be issued a fine if it is. Gerry was never informed about this law, and she was never given a fine either. So what was going to happen now? Danny Crumnow, the Riesel police chief, stated that Gerry's grass was too high and that she was in violation of the city ordinance. Even so, Gerry was never issued a ticket, so she had no clue what was going on. Eventually, the police showed up at her front door to inform her that she was being sent to jail. Gerry was so confused and had no clue what to do. There had to be some way to fix this, but Gerry didn't know where to start. Gerry claimed that she'd never received any kind of notice about going to court. Because of that, Gerry didn't show up in court and a warrant for her arrest was issued. Gerry thought about her options. She was a bit too old and weak to mow the lawn herself, but she couldn't really afford to pay someone else to do the work either. She was in a real predicament, but she never expected what would happen next. Put yourself in Gerry's shoes and imagine how scared she must have been thinking that she was going to jail. How would she get herself out of this with no money and no help? She would soon find out things were about to look up. As Gerry sat in her living room chair, she was at a loss on what to do next. She didn't have a family that lived close, and her husband had passed away many years ago. She was out of options, but how could she go to jail? As she pondered on what to do, she began to hear strange sounds coming from outside. She crept to her window to get a closer look and felt shivers travel through her body. There were 4 boys coming towards her from the edge of her land. What were they doing on her property? What did they want? She began to grow nervous, and this was literally the last thing she needed. Were they a bunch of troublemakers who were targeting older people? As the boys got closer to her, she knew what she needed to do. She would fight. Unfortunately, home invasions are a very real concern for the elderly. Because they can be a bit weaker and naive than other people, the elderly are an easy target for those with ill intentions. Hopefully, Gerry was prepared for whatever was coming her way. As the boys moved closer, Gerry realized something different about them. They were young boys, very young boys. The oldest one was maybe 15. Even so, Gerry felt very uncomfortable about their presence. The boys began to look around her property, and when she could finally see them clearly, the boys had dirt and mud all over them. But what could they possibly be looking for? Confused but curious, Gerry tried to get a closer look. The boys began to play and laugh, but they were still on her property. Gerry had no clue what they were doing. Should she call the police? As soon as she grabbed her phone, she noticed that one of the boys grabbed a tool from a bag they were carrying. What in the world was going on? 2 of the boys stayed behind while the other 2 disappeared. The boys who stayed behind began to grab what looked like garden tools, such as some shears, a weed whacker, and a few other things. Gerry was in shock. What exactly were they doing? But as soon as the other boys came around the corner, she noticed that one of them had a lawnmower. Soon enough, the boys were in full swing, mowing the lawn and ripping out overgrown weeds. Gerry couldn't believe it. The boys' kind gesture brought tears to her face. She'd lived in that home 59 years, and she was left speechless after seeing what the boys were doing for her.